Good afternoon, and welcome to this sacred gathering to celebrate the life of Ken Yeo. And welcome to the Olympia Unitarian Universalist Congregation. I'm the Reverend Mary Geer, Minister for OUUC. I'm joined today by the Reverend Eric Ness and Troy Fisher, our music director. Thank you to Kate McHugh and everyone at the tech table, and to all who helped create and support this sacred space today. I am joining you virtually today as I recover from COVID, taking care of myself and taking care of you. Thank you to my colleagues who pivoted this week so that I could be with you virtually today, and thank you for your understanding. We are streaming and recording this service today, grateful for your presence in whatever way you have arrived. It matters that you are here. May this be a time and a place for each of us to experience the spirit of love and healing. We gather in community when we have lost someone we love. While grief can feel so lonely, we gather to mourn and to help us remember that we are not alone. We gather to remember and honor a beloved member of our community. We gather to reconnect to the spirit of the one we mourn, to reconnect with each other, and to something greater than ourselves. We gather to help us remember that we are alive and that life continues even after we are gone. Ken Yeo was a beloved husband, brother, uncle, cousin, and a beloved member of this community. We miss him, his warm smile and welcoming presence. And we remember that the loss is the cost of love. May we feel that love today. It is the practice of this congregation to light a chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist tradition. May the cup be a symbol of our community of love, and the flame a symbol of the life that is in each of us and lives on. We light our chalice with words from the Reverend Greg Ward. If we are lucky, we will all get a chance during our life to know someone who becomes for us an exemplar of living. And if we are really lucky, we will recognize how they ended up passing on some of their goodness to us. But one thing is certain: no one, not one of us, entering this world can escape the cost of living. The price we pay is this: to live in this world, we must accept that someday we will have to die. To love what is alive, we must accept having to lose what we've made precious through our care. To be fully and fiercely human, we must accept having to be breakable and sometimes broken open. When we stop to notice how Ken's life gave us a path and a little light to see by, it helps encourage us to carry that light forward. Though each of us carries forth in this world a small flame, we know that the ability of the light to brighten the world depends upon the many others who learn to walk with it in their hearts. We light this chalice today to honor the life and living of a truly bright light, Ken Yeo.
Let's sing together a song that was on Ken's list of songs. The hymn, My Life Flows On in Endless Song. The lyrics will be projected up on the screen. If you're joining us online, you can find the lyrics posted in the chat. My life flows on in endless song, above earth's lamentations. I hear the real, though far off I hear the music ringing, it sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest round me roars, I know the truth it liveth. What though the darkness round me close, till in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love prevails in heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prison cells and dungeons vile, our thoughts to them are winging, when friends by shame are undefiled. How can I keep from singing? Thank you for singing.
Ken Yeo was born September 17, 1937, in Auckland, New Zealand, the eldest child of Frank and Kathleen Yeo. Ken died after a short illness in Madigan Hospital, JBLM, Sunday morning, April 14th, at the age of 86. At age 16, Ken joined the Royal New Zealand Air Force as a boy entrant. Ken completed his education and received training as an aircraft mechanic and sheet metal worker. Ken wanted to see the world outside New Zealand, and he did for 24 years. I had the privilege of hiking with Ken many times with the hiking group Them, Tuesday hikes especially for men. A relatively informal hiking group that began in this congregation. Ken was a quiet man, but as we were hiking, if others weren't talking, then Ken enjoyed talking as much as I enjoyed listening. Ken told me about the parts of his life that brought him happiness. As a boy, Ken enjoyed sailing in a small sailboat in the bay close to where he lived. He would pay attention to the wind, waves, and weather when he was in the sailboat in the quiet of the bay. Later, Ken learned how to fly a glider, a similar activity to sailing where he paid attention to the thermal updrafts and downdrafts in the quiet of the glider. But it wasn't the stories of sailing or gliding that Ken liked to tell most. The story that Ken liked to tell most was the day he met his wife, Anne. Ken's ship visited Pearl Harbor for 6 weeks in 1973. As part of military diplomacy, Ken's ship offered a wine and cheese reception on board the ship, and the Americans organized female volunteers to show the New Zealand sailors some of Hawaii. Ken had been a bachelor all his life, and the rest of his group of younger helicopter mechanics were all married. As they looked down from the railing of the ship, they asked Ken to choose which of the women lined up to go up the gangplank, who he would like to escort to the wine and cheese reception. Ken looked down from the railing and said, "I fancy that tall one there." Ken's mates counted the female volunteers lined up on the pier, and then the sailors lined up to escort them aboard the ship and made sure that Ken would be there to take Anne's hand when she set foot on the ship's deck. When Anne and Ken were at the wine and cheese reception, there was a New Zealand sailor who may have had too much to drink. He was loud and boisterous. Ken excused himself from Anne and walked over to the sailor. Anne saw Ken speaking in gentle tones to the loud sailor. Ken calmed his shipmate down, and the sailor later left. What Ken did at that moment made an impression on Anne. She saw that Ken was a gentle man. I think all of us who knew Ken experienced him as a gentle man. Ken and Anne saw each other pretty much every day they could for the next 6 weeks, and they got to know each other. When the time came for Ken's ship to depart, Anne found herself looking over the harbor from the hospital while she was taking her break as a nurse, knowing that her sailor was shipping out. While Ken and Anne were apart, they communicated as much as possible, often by expensive long-distance phone calls. They were married in Honolulu on Pearl Harbor Day, 1974, almost 50 years ago. Ken retired after 24 years in the New Zealand military as a senior NCO in 1977. He and Anne returned to the United States, where Anne resumed her career as a nurse in the U.S. Army. During those years, they lived in Colorado, Kentucky, Texas, and Germany. Anne retired from the Army in 1991. They agreed that Ken would decide where they would move next. As Anne told it, Ken, the avid sailor, opened one of his sailing magazines and said, "This Puget Sound area looks good." So they moved to Olympia in 1991 and promptly fell in love with the Pacific Northwest. Ken went to work at JBLM as a civilian, repairing helicopters. Ken enjoyed repairing things. Sometimes when the helicopters from the Gulf War or the war in Afghanistan came in, Ken would clean up the blood from the seats that had bullet holes in them before he could begin to repair the aircraft. When Ken retired from maintaining aircraft at JBLM in 2014, he needed something to do. Ken and Anne both acknowledged that sailing was more Ken's love than Anne's, but they agreed to walk the path of boat ownership together. They purchased a sailboat they named Blind Faith. Ken told me about some of their boating adventures, but his eyes lit up when he told me about the small repairs he would make on his boat. Ken is the only person I know who received as much happiness repairing his sailboat as he did sailing it. Ken truly made his own happiness. After living in the United States for 18 years, Ken went through the process of naturalization and became a U.S. citizen in 2005 while retaining his New Zealand citizenship. Ken was preceded in death by his parents several decades earlier, and also by his younger sister Sally in Australia in 2023. Ken is survived by his wife Anne, as well as several generations of cousins in New Zealand and Australia, and some of Anne's family in Virginia and Arizona. None of us often know what the single best day of our life might be, Ken was clear that the happiest day of his life was the day he met his wife, Ann. And now Jim Lingenfelter will say a few words.
You got me tearing up already. In the 15 plus years, maybe 20 years that I've known Ken, I've found him the gentlest person I've ever known. But not just gentle, he was cool, calm, and collected. I first met him at a cheese and wine affair at the Yeo's in their condo overlooking the water. And it was clear by the sparkle in Ken's eyes that he loved it. He loved looking at the river, the chutes, Bud Inlet, the yacht club, Puget Sound, but mostly looking and caring for his boat, Blind Faith, that's out across the water. But Ken was also sensitive. He was aware that when Emily and I sold our boat, that I was withdrawing, suffering from the withdrawal from all those things. And he offered a partnership. He said, you help me with my boat and you can use it. Well, it didn't turn into quite the partnership I thought because he didn't need much maintenance. There are a few times, the little things he needed a second hand, but he loved doing that stuff, as Eric told you about. But I sure enjoyed sailing with Ken. After a little review of the boat and how to start it, and then he was in a very tight slip, very tight at Fiddlehead Marina downtown. And it was a challenge to slip in and slip out of that without problems. But that was all right. I thought I could handle that. So as soon as that partnership started, we started going out. The old haunts, Eld Inlet, Woodard Bay, Hope Island, Quartermaster Harbor, and other places, mostly by ourselves. It was Ken's boat, and he loved it. He loved being on the water. He and Ann spent some time going through the San Juans, but one thing that he didn't do was going through Deception Pass on the boat. So we concocted an adventure that we were going to do that. And I assured Ann that with Ken at the helm and me there to pull all the lines, he would be safe, we'd do all right. So we've snuck up the kind of the inside passage and found a little cove just this side of the pass and put an anchor out there and waited for the right tide and weather for the next morning. And sure enough, the next morning, the conditions were right. We lifted that anchor and we sailed through the pass, and it was spectacular. We had the wind behind us as we entered Rosario Straits. We proceeded sailing through the islands, San Juan Islands, and ended up at Friday Harbor that night. And the next morning, we had no intention of staying, but we got up and it was foggy. So we made a decision, since we'd promised to be safe, that we were going to spend the day, make sure when we left, it was safe. So we waited until the next morning, and we were up and ready at dawn, and we waited, and finally about 10 o'clock, it cleared enough. We left Friday Harbor. We had about a half a mile of visibility at that point, and saying, well, if it's too foggy when we get out there in the open water, we'll just turn around and go back to Friday Harbor. But it cleared enough for us to proceed. Where the island there, the southern point of San Juan Island, you go through Cattle Pass and you're in the Straits of Juan de Fuca. and it was still clear. We went through there, and it was actually clearing at that point, and we were starting to feel pretty good. But lo and behold, the weather changed. Yeah, it got a little warmer. We were a little more comfortable, but the fog started coming in, and that mile of visibility became a half mile, a quarter mile, and pretty soon I found myself moving out to the bow of the boat. And it wasn't long, and that fog had us totally closed in. We couldn't see anything. So we went into the procedure of stopping the motor, listening for another craft out there, and blowing our own foghorn. Every 3 minutes we did this, and it took us a couple of hours to cross the straits. And when we got across, we were safe, we felt good, we congratulated ourselves, we had done it the right way, we had survived. Then we started coming down into Puget Sound, and damn if it didn't happen again. So, Puget Sound gets to be a pretty busy place. There's lanes for the big boats in the center of the sound, buoys on both sides, and Ken was operating with a GPS, set the course, and was staying outside of those lanes. And we were heading south down into the sound, and all of a sudden, bah! 3 times. That's what I did. My heart stopped. I said, "My God, turn to shore." Ken said he had started to turn just in response to what I was, my excitement on the bow, and he says, "I don't think that's going to work. We're already in 6.5 feet of depth. We can't go to shore any further." So we waited, and finally when things calmed down, we had a discussion, and Ken's cool, calm approach said, "Well, I think it's safe to proceed." And we crossed that ferry line. Sure enough, whatever blew that horn at us, which I'm sure it was a ferry, had proceeded, and we were safe again. And once we got past the Kingston ferry route across our path, the sun rose, and we proceeded home. And I'm here to tell you the story. Want to add just a little note about, I had the story about Ken's boat being tied up in Honolulu also, and Ken's comments shared privately about that day. And the sum of that was that he said, "God, I loved that woman." Thank you.
And now Ruth Kahn will have some remembrances and poetry.
Hi, I'm Ruth Kahn. I've known Ann and Ken for over 50 years. I was one of those nurses. I didn't realize we were volunteers, Ann. I thought we'd been invited to a party. So I had already known Ann for a year, and we were roommates, and we went down to the ship, and she met Ken, and the rest is pretty much history. But we lived together for a bit longer because she couldn't get out of the service right away, and I was there at their wedding. And then I was at his death with Ann. I was privileged to be there with her. In the weeks that followed his death, I found myself writing poetry. I'm not a poet, but I found poems coming out of me, and I'd like to read 2 of them for you today. One, there's a little levity to this one. I hope you won't be offended, but you had us laughing, so I think it's okay. In fact, I had joked with Ken the night before he died about that he had a song. He had his own song, and wasn't that great? So this poem is called "I'm Just Ken." I'm just Ken. No, not that Ken. I'm just Ken. Why the formal Kenneth when laying crepe? I'm just Ken, the gentle Kiwi seafarer who prefers salty air in his face and music and a long walk with friends and my beautiful wife. Not lilies and gloom and hushed voices in a closed room. Let the air and the sunlight in. I'm on my final voyage, and the wind is at my back, and only blue skies and calm seas lie ahead. And the second poem is more for Anne. It's called Love. I will always have this love, the racing heart of passion, and the gentle rhythm of our days, our eyes open to wonder, and our hearts open to each other. Your arms around me in joy and sorrow. These cannot be taken from me. They live inside me, part of my fabric, and sustain me. Love will always be.
Thank you. And Reverend Mary, I'm not sure if you want to read Anne's remembrance, or shall I?
I'll be happy to, Eric. Thank you. So Anne wrote some thoughts about Ken and her 5 decades with him, and she asked me to share her words with you today. Anne writes, after I met Ken at Pearl Harbor in late 1973, he invited me to visit him in New Zealand in early 1974. When I boarded my Air New Zealand flight in Honolulu, I was the last passenger to arrive, and I was bumped to first class. On that long flight, I sat next to an Englishwoman who was traveling down under to visit her daughter. The daughter had married a New Zealander. And when I told her that I was going to visit a nice New Zealand man that I'd met, she told me, with a warm smile, that New Zealand men make good husbands. As I later confirmed over our 50 years together, she was entirely correct. Ken was a very kind man. He taught me by his example how to look a homeless person in the eye, treat them with respect, and do what I could in the moment to help. He was fun to live with. He was immensely practical, and he could fix almost anything. We shared many travels. Our favorite place to live was Germany, where I was stationed with the U.S. Army in the 1980s. Our favorite place to visit, many times, our places, were the Hawaiian Islands and Cannon Beach, Oregon. Ken acquired a passion for sailing at a young age. Over the years, we lived many places that were inland, without maritime opportunities, but when the time came for me to retire from the Army in 1991, we chose Western Washington for our new home, primarily because of the lure of the magnificent Puget Sound. Over time, we both acknowledged that sailing was more his love than mine, but I learned how to help him with the boat, and I mastered the galley so as to feed us well when we were underway. As many people would say, if they have had happy long-term relationships, I know that I am a different person, probably a better person, than I would have been if I had never known Ken.
Let's sing together this song that was Ken's favorite, Blue Boat Home. I invite you to rise and let's sing together. I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean. Still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now. Never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply my starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heaven and our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite sea before me, sing my sky, my sailor song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
We create space in our hearts to hear some of the many stories and memories of Ken here with us today. For those online, I invite anyone who wishes to share a quality or brief memory about Ken. You can write that in the chat, which we will share with the family. For those here in person, if you have a story that must be told, I invite you forward now to tell it, and there will be more time for sharing also after the service. So please come up to the microphone so everyone can hear you, including those online.
Hello, I'm Warren Dawes, and I know many of you. I've been a member here for many years, and I've known Ken for many years too, but not as a sailor, but rather as a hiker. Some of you may have been attending an unfortunate death, Ken Guza recently. Ken Guza, and prior to that, a few years prior to that, Pete Taylor and I first went hiking in 2002. It was a nice day. We went to Nisqually Delta and we hiked that and we enjoyed it so much we said, that was fun, let's do it again next Tuesday. And there was born the THEM hiking group, which stands for Tuesday Hikes, Especially for Men. And to this day, we hike on Tuesdays. and we have several members. I wonder how many members we might have in the audience today. Would you mind just raising your hand so we can see? Yeah, we have a few people here. Yeah, and that's great. The membership has ranged from 40 to 80 over the years, and we've been very active on Tuesdays especially. That's our hiking day. And when Ken came to the Northwest to do his sailing, he learned something about being out in our beautiful countryside because he got associated with some hikers. And Ken has been a very active hiker as well as a sailor over the years. I've enjoyed many times going out on the diverse hikes that we have around the area. We've had a group that has varied in size from 40 to 80 active members over the years. It was started by Pete Taylor, Ken Guza, and me. Then Bob Allison came back from Arizona, also a member of this church, and joined us. We had several members in the church that became active them members, and their friends became active members. And like I say, we had a membership ranging from 40 or 50 to 80 members. And to this day, we're still active. In fact, I'm planning to hike on Tuesday. Wouldn't you know it? Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to say that we were blessed with having people like Ken in our group because we thoroughly enjoyed our outings together. And I won't go on. You've heard some of this before, so I just like to tell you all what a pleasure it's been to have Ken in our hiking group. Thank you.
Are there others?
Oh, mine's very short. I was the lead of the sewing ministry here at OUUC, and Ken was also a sewist. I don't know if you knew that, but he made all the like sails and seat covers, and he did lots of stuff for his boat. And his precious little machine is going to be with the sewing ministry now. Thank you, Ken.
Are there others? Please.
Hi, I'm Tess, and Tess Schulze, and I've been coming for more than 15 years. I don't actually know how long, and I don't know when I met Ken. He's always been here. He was always a friendly face in the crowd, someone who was gentle and kind and lifted my spirits when I was sad. And he was the kind of person that wasn't smiling in spite of the world. He embraced all of the world. And he'll be sorely missed. Thank you.
Are there others? Please.
I'm Betty Nylander, and I live next door to Ann and Ken, and for 20 years. Ken was a real rock. He bailed me out a number of times when I had problems. Both of you did. And I'll miss Ken because he was always there to help. And, you know, it's rare to find a neighbor like that. So, again, we'll miss a man. We love Ken, we love you. Thank you.
Are there others?
Good afternoon. My name's Otto, and I knew Ken very marginally, but I was so impressed with his quiet and powerful, peaceful, gentle presence that I just wish we had more people like that on the planet. That's it.
Are there others? No?
Well, I'm Larry Zesson, and had the fortune to be a neighbor with Ken and Ann for the last couple of years. And we've both shared, we had a little blue Prius, little blue car, same color, they looked identical. And I had the misfortune of leaving my car parked out in the parking lot and went out next morning and there was a rock behind the wheel. And what is going on? And when I started the car, I found out that somebody had removed the catalytic converter from my little car. And Ken said, well, you know, that's the way things are here. But Ken has been a wonderful neighbor and friend for Betty and I, and we appreciate all that you've done. He was a wonderful person. Thank you.
Are there others?
My name's Fred Kellogg, and I consider Ann one of my closest friends here at OUUC. She was celebrant when I did a This I Believe service in 2005. She was my celebrant, and we were on worship arts together for a few years. And I do share and mourn her loss, and I also relate to what she said about when she and Ken first met, and then Ken had to go back to New Zealand. I'm kind of experiencing that scenario now with my wife, Beatrice, but I'll be going back to Cameroon soon, so again, I mourn your loss. Thank you.
Okay. Are we all okay about done with this section? And know that you can talk amongst each other in the commons when we have refreshments. Share your memories. OUUC member Sharon Love worked with Ann to create these images of Ken's life. Ken wanted us to say this call and response by Roland Gibson. It's in the UU hymnal. And after I say what I say, if you will please say, "We remember him," and say it loud. In the rising of the sun and its going down, in the blowing of the wind and the chill of the winter, in the opening of the buds and the rebirth of spring, in the blueness of the skies and the warmth of the summer, in the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of the autumn, at the beginning of the year and when it ends, when we are weary and in need of strength, when we are lost and sick at heart, when we have joy that we crave to share, when we have decisions that are difficult to make, when we have achievements that are based on His. As long as we live, He too will live, for He is now a part of us as we remember Him.
And so we close with gratitude for the life and love of Ken Yeo. Though he has left this world, he leaves behind many stories and much love. The loss of Ken has left a hole in many lives and hearts, and he is so missed. May we fill that hole with love, the fierce love that Ken had for his family and friends, for his beloved Anne, for this community, and for life itself. We extinguish our chalice with the words that Ken loved from the poem Belated Thanks by Jane Merchant. Accept my gratitude, long overdue, for blessings all that tinted dawns renew, for faithful friends, for work and rest and mirth, splendor of sky and fruitfulness of earth. And that when I am thankless, tired, and fretful, Lord, you are never weary or forgetful. For those online today, thank you so much for your presence. May you go in peace. And for those on site, you are invited to gather outside at the columbarium to commit Ken's ashes. I'm pretty sure the memorial's reception team has put up canopies for the rain today. And after that, you may gather for refreshments and conversation and stories in the commons. Thank you all so much for your presence here today.